Hello, my name is Nathan Gubler. I am the Accounting Applications Specialist here at Salt Lake County in the Mayor's Financial Administration. And today we're going to be going over PeopleSoft billing basics, understanding how PeopleSoft standard billing works, and all of the background processes that are involved. So at first glance this might seem a little overwhelming. There are several processes that run behind the scenes when preparing standard bills in the system that you probably are not aware of. And so we'll touch base on those behind the scene processes just to help you get a better understanding of how everything works. So when you run into issues and you can kind of deduce maybe some problems without even having to contact anyone for assistance. So first we're going to go through how to input an invoice in PeopleSoft standard billing, and then we'll transition through what happens next and the entries that it creates and the other various tasks that are involved from monitoring the collection of the payment and seeing the entries that show it's been posted into the system and the money is in the bank. And so again, bear with me. This could be is kind of a deep dive into PeopleSoft standard billing, but I think it'll be very beneficial. So here is the process, the billing receivable process workflow. This workflow is an important part of the billing process used in both standard and incurred billing. We'll use this as a summary and we will go through each of the individual components throughout this presentation. Okay, so let's go to the beginning. Let's talk about billing defaults. So we're going to move forward to this slide to look at the bill entry page. So the navigation, the breadcrumbs you see at the top of the page here is where you will go to create a bill. I've gone ahead and I've clicked on the Add a New Value tab, and there are several fields that are here for us to enter in that we can fill out. But each one of these, well, let's see. Let's just start at the top. The business unit field. When we select our business unit, the business unit is different for every organization. Based on the amount of the volume of transactions you will be doing for billing and kind of the nature of what it is you're billing for, you'll be assigned to different business units. In my example, I'm an organization who doesn't do a lot of billing, so it doesn't make sense to create an individual business unit. So I'll go ahead and use the SLCO 1 business unit. It's the catch-all. There's many organizations that do use it, and usually they have minimal volume of invoices. In the SLCO 1 business unit, there's several defaults that are set, and I guess what I mean by this is if we look at the pyramid, this is the hierarchy of defaults. Business unit is at the top, so it's kind of like the main default. If anything, the bill requires you to fill out this business unit field, and so if I just fill the business unit out and I click add and begin creating my bill, it's going to grab only the defaults from the business unit. Defaults could be different fields. It'll default fields that are populated on the actual bill. So when I refer to defaults, really what's saved at the business unit level will be different fields that are populated on the invoice automatically, things that I don't have to go into once the bill is created and change. The next level is the bill type, and so either a credit bill or a debit bill. each of those bill types have unique fields that will be populated. So the next default on the hierarchy is the bill source, and that's set up for specific organizations. Again, the customer, there's settings, there's fields on the actual customer itself that can be set up that populate certain fields on a bill once it's created. And the last and lowest level, but the most powerful level, is the bill entry itself. So when you create the bill, you can override any field that you want, and it will override any defaults that were put on the bill above. In this example, it will override anything that's defaulted from the customer level, the bill source level, the bill type header, or the business unit level. So in the triangle, as you work your way down, you're defaulting everything above it. So the bill entry. So let's fill out a bill. I've entered in a business unit. I'm going to let my invoice automatically create the invoice number. I'm going to select the MFA bill type identifier. It will give me some defaults, again, like we've kind of discussed. The bill source will give me a little bit more additional defaults, and I've selected MFA 001. I went in and found my customer. The invoice date is the date that will drive the due date on your invoice. So with this invoice date of 1/1/2018, we'll expect that the due date on my invoice should be February 1st, 2018, but we'll look at that when we get there. The accounting date I've entered in as 1/31/2018. That accounting date will drive the accounting date on the journal entry that is created to book the receivable and the revenue. I went ahead and pressed OK, and it takes us to this screen. So as you notice, I haven't even typed anything in yet on the bill page, but it's already populated several fields for me. These are the defaulting that we were referring to previously when we were looking at the hierarchy, that triangle of the different levels of defaults. For instance, we have, let's see, the collector is SLC 001. I believe that was defaulted from the business unit. Bank account was specific to the bill source or bill type. Pay terms was on one of them, and there's several other fields here that they're defaulted based on the values in those different field options that we entered in to create our bill. So the short of the long is it's going to populate everything, most everything you need without minimal entry if you enter in to the lowest level of fields on the bill. So everything looks good here. So we're creating the bill. Everything looks good. I made sure my invoice and accounting date flowed through as I expected. I clicked on the line. Let's click on the line info tab 1. And this is where you're actually entering in the meat of the bill, how much it's going to be, and what accounting stream you want to book the revenue to, etc. So this is the first page it lands us on. You can go ahead and type in a quantity. I'll put a quantity of 1. We have a unit price, so I put that in. Note as well there's a unit of measure. EA stands for each. You can hit the magnifying glass and select one that's appropriate for you. I believe there's like a monthly unit of measure, so if you're billing for rent, probably the more appropriate option in my example would be to the unit of measure of month, since I am going to be doing monthly rental. However, we're splitting hairs with that. I go ahead and enter in a description and save it. When you save it, you notice that it will automatically fill out your gross extended, extrapolates the data for you. Also, as well, there is in the top left-hand corner of this screen, the invoice MFA, then a lot of zeros and 682. That was created once we click Save. Before, in our previous page, if you noticed, it said Next. But again, the billing defaults, because we entered in the bill source that we did, it automatically knew we needed to have the MFA prefix on our invoice. Next, you want to click the Accounting tab. Here we're going to enter in our accounting string. If we have Fund, I'm going to put in Department, Account, BUDREF. Again, I'm going to click Save again. And that's it on this page. Now, I will take a moment to discuss the implications of typing in the agency code on this page. It will let you type in the agency code on this page. We advise you not to, as it will be removed before being posted to GL. In fact, it would actually cause some headache if you, well, previous it was causing headache. We'll edit this out. Let's go ahead and click on the Header Info 1 tab. This takes us to the final piece of creating a PeopleSoft standard bill on the system. Just want to double check everything, make sure it looks good. And to do that, we can use the pro forma link that is on the page. So there's an icon to the right of the amount of the invoice, and that is our pro forma. When we click on that, it's going to show us a preview of what the actual physical invoice will look like. This gives us one more opportunity to double check and make sure everything turns out the way we expect. So earlier I just want you to notice that the due date is actually 1/31/2018. I had supposed it was going to be February 1st. Obviously my simple math is something I need to brush up on. We entered in the invoice date of 1/1/2018. So net 30 would give us the due date of 1/31/2018. Everything else looks good on this. Next, we go ahead and when we're ready to invoice this out and send it through the system, we change the status from new to ready status. This flags it in the system as available to be processed. Let's go ahead and click Save. Now, there are two options, or two ways that this bill can be processed through the system. One, we can manually run the process on the page we're at. Or second, we could leave it be in ready status and allow the overnight processes to handle that work for us. Either way, whatever option we choose, this is the workflow for it. We've kind of discussed it a little bit. The dotted box, that is the BI job 03K. That's the process that in the system, it's kind of like the heart of billing. This BI job 03K process, it's also used in incurred billing for organizations who use the full project costing product. So anything in any billing in PeopleSoft project costing will use the BI job 03K process. So it's a major deal. And this is what it looks like in the process monitor. It has several sub-processes. And like we talked about earlier, each one of these processes does a specific thing. We can actually group them. The first few processes will prepare the PDF invoice to be printed. The next will format accounting lines to make sure that they will pass our edit checking process and that it contains all the required fields. This process will create the accounting entries to book the revenue and the receivables. It also performs a budget check process, which the system requires. However, we do not budget for revenue as we do for, I take that back. It will provide the budget checking processes to satisfy system requirements. It will also create the error pending item, which we'll discuss in detail later. The error pending item simply is the journal entry to recognize the receipt of cash against the invoice, and it doesn't post this journal entry immediately. It stays in the system until the payment has been posted against the invoice. And then the next few steps, sub-processes of this process, aren't applicable to us. So we have two options of how we want to run this process. Let's look at the process to run it on the page. We can go ahead and click the icon to the right of pro forma. Prior to changing this bill from new to ready status, this icon, the processing icon, was unavailable. It was only when we changed the status from ready, or from new to ready, and click save, that it appears. We'll go ahead and click on it. After we click on it, you'll get a message that we didn't display. You can click OK. It just lets you know that after this processes, you can't go in and change the bill. One way to make changes if needed would be to create a credit memo, which we'll go over in the future. So all hope isn't lost if you've made a mistake. You can go to this navigation to view the progress of this process in the system. Again, it will take you to the process monitor, and here is the detailed view of all those sub-processes. Now, sometimes I'll go in here and run a process, and I'll sit and monitor it. I'll come back after a few minutes to make sure it's advancing to the stages that it needs to the different sub-processes. This job, fair warning, it does take about 20 minutes to run, so you wouldn't want to stay on this page and keep clicking refresh to see the updated status. You probably want to work on something else and come back to it when you're done. So that was the BI job O3K process. It's also known as a single action process. The second way that you could process your invoice, like we talked about, after you've changed the status from new to ready, you can let the overnight process run it. As you can see, this process, it's recurring every night at 7 p.m. and it picks up any invoices that are set to ready status. So we've just talked about the BI job O3K process and all its sub-processes. We finalize and create an invoice with the first part of it. So let's go ahead and look at those processes involved. These are all those processes, the BI, IV, COOO, etc. All these processes do something to finalize and create the PDF bill. There's two things once this part of the process finishes that it does. Number one, it will send the invoice, the PDF invoice, to the report manager. The report manager is the report repository in PeopleSoft, and when you schedule queries or reports and when you process invoices, it will all deliver the report to the report manager. So here's the navigation to get there. In this example, it does not show the invoice, but it will appear here when you run it real time. The second thing it does is it attaches the invoice to the original bill in the system. So you notice here there's the view invoice image link that will appear once this part of the process is finished. So you can download the PDF invoice from either one of these locations. The budget check process, I mentioned that it does run that. Currently our PeopleSoft configuration requires that for the billing process. Next, it creates the accounting entries. Let's go ahead and deep dive and look at what those are. Again, two entries that it creates. In the middle of this screen you see the BILDGL01, and then two processes down from that is the BILDAR01. The BILDGL01, it inserts accounting lines into this table. In this table, the BI count entry table is a staging table, and from that staging table the journal generator will pick up those lines and create a journal entry for us overnight. Then we'll create the error pending item. The build AR01 process, it loads the bill as an AR pending item temporarily to the pending dist staging table. So it will load the lines of the bill to this staging table, and it sits in the staging table and it gets updated, and once payment is received against the invoice, only then will it post the journal entries. Then it will change one of the statuses on those lines to create a journal entry for receiving the payment. So, kind of in review a little bit, we created accounting entries with the BILDGL01 process, and immediately the journal generator overnight will generate the receivable and the revenue for that. The second set of lines, the second entries we're creating is the AR pending item entry, and that will be the journal entry essentially to record the receipt of payment against that invoice. That is not a journal that is created automatically overnight. It sits in the system being called an AR pending item, and when the receipt of cash is made against the invoice, then and then only will it create that actual journal entry to receive cash against the invoice, against the receivable. So, talk a little bit about the journal generate process. Let's take a look here again and see what it looks like. So, FSJGen, again, this runs nightly at 2 a.m. and it creates journal entries throughout all the subsystems and brings them into the GL. Then what runs after we create it and bring it into the GL is the GLJ edit process. This process handles the edit check and budget check process, and it will run that automatically for us on those journals. And then it will then proceed to run the GLJP process, which actually posts these subsystem journals to the general ledger. Again, there's two types of journals that will be generated, but the first one that happens immediately is the entry to recognize the revenue and book the receivable. That's called the BI entry. It's going to debit the billing, the AR default billing account, and it will credit the revenue account that we listed on the accounting link on the line info 1 tab of our bill entry. So The next piece to this is the AR update. So it creates the receivable, the AR pending item. The receivable and AR pending item are kind of synonymous at this point. So this is a process that's scheduled to run overnight as well. Here it is here at 7:30 every evening it will run. So right after the BI job 03K runs, so after we create all of the invoices in the system, the AR update then runs, and it will create the AR pending item in the system. So items essentially are, it's accounts receivable, and that come from different sources in the system. So far we've been talking about the billing module and creating a bill, and there's an item associated with every bill. Other ways that items get in the system: when an organization bills a customer and they don't use PeopleSoft, but we're receiving the cash and we record the cash in PeopleSoft. That's another way that an item is created. And there's also other ways as well. So this AR update process, it does a lot to the items in PeopleSoft. So we're focusing here on the billing module. So this process creates the AR pending items for those bills that we've entered. And again, I really get into the nitty-gritty of this. So I put down the actual table in the system. The table in the system is where the data is stored. And so the pending disk table is where the billing lines were sent in one of the processes. And so the AR update looks at that table and it creates the AR pending item based on that. The AR update, when it runs every night, it also updates partial payments against invoices so that reports can be accurate, the agent report can be accurate, the customer activity report can be accurate, and the different logs in the system. Okay, so far we have reviewed creating a bill, entering in the accounting information of where we want to receive payment for that bill. We've discussed the options to process the bill using BI job 03K process. This process is the heart of PeopleSoft billing. We've talked about how it's used in both in standard billing or incurred billing. We've talked about each of those sub-processes generally in the BI job 03K process, how it creates an immediate accounting entry to book the receivable and the revenue. We also discussed how it created the entry, the AR pending item entry, so that the receivable can be tracked in the system until payment is received. So let's talk about receiving payment. The money comes in and it's posted against, and the data entry is made to post it against an invoice. Later that evening, the AR update process runs. It then coordinates that posting of payment against the invoice and triggers the lines to be updated in the table so that now a journal can be created, so we feel the effect of receiving that payment in the system and it relieves the item. So the journal is created overnight and we get what is called the ARPY journal. And this is when we receive payment against an invoice that has been created in PeopleSoft. It debits cash and it credits our accounts receivable. So I just wanted to review all these other processes that we have for billing. The last one is the ARH process. That runs nightly, and what that does is it optimizes the performance of reports, specifically the agent report. And again, I just wanted to disclose that so I'm able to dump all of my knowledge on with you. So on that last little segment, we talked about receiving cash and how the AR update process updates the AR pending item or receivable item in the system to let the journal generator know that it can generate the journal entries to receive cash. We talked about the last process that runs overnight related to billing, and that was the ARH process that helps enhance the reporting of outstanding items in the system. Let's move on to creating a credit bill or credit memo. So there's 3 options that I will instruct you on that we use currently in PeopleSoft, and we'll go over each one of those. The first is adjusting an entire bill. So make your navigation to PeopleSoft to this page, adjust an entire bill, and you want to make a couple of changes on here. First, before we get to the screen, it's going to ask you for the bill or the invoice that you want to credit or that you want to adjust. And so I've selected the invoice that we see, the MFA 682 invoice. Go ahead and mark the radio button Credit Entire Bill. Once you do this, come over to the Credit Bill field. Previous to what it shows in this field, it said Next. But what we did, so we can specifically tie this adjustment to the specific bill, we will actually put in the original invoice, and then we'll put CR on the end. So we're crediting the entire bill. Next, you want to click the Adjustment Reason magnifying glass and fill out the reason. We're going to select error in this case. So we're good to go. We click Save. Now we have this blue hyperlink, the header info 1 link that is available, and that just takes us to the bill header. It takes us through the Express bill header though. So it takes us to the Express entry screen. The Express billing screen, it is the exact same as the screen we were working on before to create a bill, except the Express screen has all the different tabs and links that we'll need on one page, and it's collapsible. So you're entering in the same information on both pages, except the one we were working on earlier to create a bill was the standard billing page, and it had multiple tabs and links you needed to click to input your information. The Express billing screen, it's condensed for ease of access and quickly going through things. We're going to change the quantity to -1 and click Save. Note that the gross extended now says -$1,100. When we prepare a credit memo in PeopleSoft, it will require an approval. I'm going to just stamp that with a star, and after we go through each of the 3 different ways you can adjust a bill, we will go look at how we can actually approve these. Note that it will automatically have the bill status created in ready status, and we know that it won't get picked up on the overnight process if it's left in ready status and it's a credit memo, because it will actually require that approvals be made to the credit memo. So if we leave it be, so if we created one and we never came to check on it through Express Billing or through the standard billing page, so long as no one approves the credit memo, the overnight process won't do anything with it, even though it is in ready status. It will require that it has the appropriate approvals. So that was adjusting the entire bill. Well, what if we only want to change certain lines on the bill? We maybe fat-fingered the quantity and we need to reduce the quantity. Well, our navigation would be similar, except we would select the Adjust Selected Bill lines. Once you come in here, we want to mark the Adjust Selected Lines radio button. After that, again, we'll follow the standard of entering the adjustment ID, which will use our invoice, our original invoice, and we'll type ADJ on the end. Again, this helps facilitate relationships between different bills, especially when you've created an original bill and you want to make changes to it. This is a way you can easily identify or group the original bill and its changes together, and for researching. Make sure on the line opt drop-down box you specify create net adjustment only. Update your adjustment reason default to error. Go ahead and identify and mark the box to select the line that you wish to adjust. Make sure that the adjustment reason appears on the end of that, the far column, on the end column on that row. Mark Save. And you notice that again you'll have the link to go to the Express Billing screen. We'll go ahead and follow the link there. You just want to make sure that, okay, we do have a -1 quantity. Click Save, and notice that it's in ready status. And this time I don't see a link for approvals. Oh, let's back up there for a minute. So this automatically created the adjustment in new status. That's what I guess we're showing here. So we need to update it to ready status and then click Save. Notice that it's gross extended, and it will then tell us that approval for the bill is currently not required. See the bill approval status. The bill approval status will be set to initial if saved. Approval will then be required and the bill must be submitted for approval. Press OK to save or cancel not to save. Let's go ahead and click OK, and I think what that was telling us, well, it's telling us exactly what it says. So we're not going to require approval on crediting this line. Approval will then be required and the bill must be, the bill approval status we set to initial if saved. Approval will then be required and the bill must be submitted for approval. I think I need to make an edit to this slide, as it may not be appropriate. We'll revisit it. So that was how to adjust selected lines. The last option for credit bill is adjusting and rebilling an entire bill. So this involves crediting the entire bill and then turning right around and creating the corrected bill. On the same Maintain Bills menu location, you'll select Adjust Entire Bill again. This time you'll click the Credit and Rebill button. Once you do that, make sure you type in your adjustment reason. And as in the previous examples, following our uniform model to name the credit bill after the original bill. And then there's an additional step on this, which is the rebill, which is the new bill we're going to turn around and create, the corrected bill. The corrected bill, I should say. And we'll type RAB on the end. Make sure that the retain original invoice value is selected. And click Save, and we can take our shortcut to look at the header for both of these. So we see on the top of the page, this is for the credit invoice. We have a -1 quantity. It is in ready status. We click Save, and we have the extended amount. And then we have an approval step that we'll need to take on this. This is the rebill. We wanted to correct it from 1 quantity, and now we're billing actually for 2. That was a mistake we made. So the first one, we entirely credited the full amount of 1, and then we turned around and we're creating the correct invoice for 2. Change it to ready status, click Save, and we see our extrapolated amount. This will then be picked up overnight, or if we do it manually, or we can create it manually with the icon, the processing icon and the top right icon. So that was crediting an entire bill and rebilling it out. So let's move on to the approvals process. Currently there exists a one-to-one relationship for the preparers of bills and approvers for credit bills. Currently that's maintained in Mayor's Finance on the user profile for each user. So if there is a scenario where your normal approver for credit bills is out of the office and you need to temporarily assign another user in your office to approve bills, contact myself or a member of the accounting team, and we can temporarily update your approver for you. And then just be sure to notify us when your normal approver is back in town or back in the office and you'd like it to be updated. So here we are. The page behind this dialog box is the Express bill page, and we've clicked on the approvals link, and this is the box we get. You'll want to make sure to preview the approvals before you submit it by clicking the button. And this was a bill that I prepared, so it appropriately is routing to my supervisor. I go ahead and submit it for approval. Now, I say we strongly suggest that you preview the approval before you submit it, just to make sure that it will route to the appropriate approver. If not, and you don't have an approver assigned to you, it's going to send out like 65 or so emails to mostly inactive email addresses, and you'll get several responses back saying it's been undeliverable. So it's something that can be overcome, but it will save you a little bit of trouble if you just preview it beforehand. Once you submit for approval, your approver, it'll show up in their work list. Then they go ahead and they approve it. and your bill is on its way. It can be processed overnight, or it can be processed on the page, the bill header page, with the process button. So that is the nuts and bolts of PeopleSoft standard billing. And we've already kind of recapped as we've gone along, but I'll just do one last recap. We talked about, in general, we talked about the processes that work behind the scenes for standard billing. We talked about how to create a bill in the system. We discussed the BI Job 03K process, how we can run that manually, or we can let it run overnight. We discussed the processes that create the receivable and revenue entry immediately in the system through that process. We discussed how that process creates an AR pending item or a receivable item that is not posted immediately. It is the accounting entry, the journal entry, that will be posted when payment is applied against that invoice. It is in the system, and the AR update process every night will update all of the AR pending items and mark the completed ones as complete once the money is received for that, and then it will go ahead and trigger the journal generator to generate the journal that money can relieve the receivable and book against our cash account. We talked about credit bills, the 3 different ways that we can do that, and approvals for credit memos. I appreciate your patience with me. Hopefully, as we progress throughout this year with our PeopleSoft quarterly trainings, the content we provide will be relevant, and the delivery in a way that's understandable for every user. If you have any questions, you can contact me through Outlook. You can call me at my desk, and we can work through any issues that you have. But thank you for your time.